Cory Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us on Little Atoms.
My pleasure.
We are sitting in a remarkable office full of kitsch and steampunk, and it looks like everything you've collected over the past 30 years?
Everything I've kept out of everything I've collected over the last 30 years, that's right.
Right. Do you feel that surrounding yourself with such creative stuff helps you in your writing process?
I guess so, a little bit. I always love those old Ray Bradbury Presents TV shows where they open it with a shot of his office with the dinosaurs and rocket ships. I'm Ray Bradbury, master of imagination, and you'd see him typing away at, his paleo typewriter. And yeah, physical culture is, if you're going to write about technology, having a lot of technology around, which, I take a very broad view and include things like books as technology. I have that piano roll up there that's the first ever contested digital file format that led to the first big copyright fight, in the early part of the 20th century in America, and John Philip Sousa saying the infernal talking machines would rob Americans of their voice boxes as monkeys lost their tails when they came out of the trees and so on. So yeah, I like having this stuff around. It's kind of, some of it's like a memento mori, like a poet keeping a skull on his desk, and some of it's inspiration.
And we were just talking on the way, and particularly in reference to Little Brother, and you just mentioned that you write about technology. Does it matter to you in that writing process that technology inevitably dates? So stuff that you're writing about now will be, especially the subject matter you write about, will be obsolete within a couple of years?
Yeah, no, not at all, because I'm not trying to predict the future. I think at best I'm trying to predict the present, which is to say I'm trying to use the device of futurism to tell stories about how technology today is invisibly and pervasively changing society, and vice versa. And, I think the easiest way to do that is to have that device, is to have that funhouse mirror. I don't think Mary Shelley was upset that, no one ever figured out how to animate dead people. I think that, her science fiction stands up very well as a cautionary tale about what happens when technology becomes your master instead of your servant, much more than it would have done if she tried to accurately gauge where the future of, lightning animated dead people was going,
And on that point, speaking of Little Brother being more of a dystopian present almost, mm-hmm. I found it really interesting. I was just reading it yesterday actually, and noting that you open talking about school laptops that schools used to spy on the kids with, and it struck me as really odd that just in February in a Philly suburb they found that laptops given to students, they had webcams on them. Those webcams were being used to literally spy on what the kids were doing outside of school. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel that, the things you're writing almost don't even go far enough?
Well, there's a perfect example of predicting the present. The No Child Left Behind Act in the United States mandates network level filtering on schools and libraries that receive federal funding in the U.S. and a bunch of other stuff that we've chipped away at with a series of constitutional lawsuits. But this particular mandate has meant that the norm for school computing has been that there's some spyware on them, that there's spyware at the network level and sometimes at the device level to see what you're clicking on and make sure it's nothing naughty. And the spyware companies that develop this stuff are, they have the character that you'd expect of an institution that believes that in its wisdom it knows better than you do what you should be looking at. The majority of them supply primarily to repressive governments and just have a sideline in corporations and schools. Some of them have gone so far, there's one that sells primarily to parents, that's gone so far as to data mine the clickstream and IM sessions and emails of kids and sell them to marketing research firms. So, to me, it's not that much of a stretch to say laptops are used to spy on kids. I call this Chekhov's first law of narrative, right? The gun on the mantelpiece in Act 1 is bound to go off in Act 3, or you could call it Mitch Kapor's aphorism, architecture is politics. Designing computers to spy on their users means that computers will be used to spy on their users. Again, this doesn't seem like a very... this doesn't seem like a particularly astute predictive exercise to me, but you can get a lot of mileage out of it in science fiction.
On the point of spying that's being done here in England. I'd be interested. You've moved from the United States, and I'd like to know what you think of the comparison between the two countries and individuals' rights to privacy in each.
Well, I think in both countries there is a dangerous syllogism that describes the approach to security, which is something must be done. We are doing something, ergo something has been done. So even if no one can explain rationally how you can prevent shoe bombers by X-raying shoes for plastic explosive that doesn't show up on X-rays, the fact that you are X-raying shoes is itself some form of mitigation or mediation for the threat of shoe bombing. I think that the biggest difference between the US and the UK in terms of the way laws are written and passed is that there is a kind of assumption that the gentleman in government and in the civil service will apply laws that are maybe overbroad or badly defined fairly. That you don't need to design law as though it were a security problem. That's the American approach to law, right? It's to approach law as a security problem. You have the problem that authority sometimes leads to abuse. How do you secure yourself against abuse of authority? You do so with a series of kind of layered security, these countermeasures that are meant to check and also reverse abuses, the checks and balances system. And I don't see that as much in evidence in the UK. I see much more. Sorry, that I've never heard anything from above my office before. This is literally a first.
I hope
Wow.
that doesn't mean something's about to explode.
No, I think it means that they're doing construction directly over top. This may be a bit hard on your recording. With any luck, this won't go very long.
Just give it a second. See what happens.
Okay.
So there seems to be this idea in the UK that, well, if you've been to Oxford or Cambridge, I mean, you just won't use the law in a bad way. That you can be trusted not to do the wrong thing, and that extends down to giving law enforcement discretion under, say, Section 44. That they'll only stop and search people who are really doing something wrong, or the creation of ASBOs, or the creation of curfews in 1,000 British towns and cities for young people, that they'll only be used by law enforcement or community support officers in ways that reflect a kind of consensus judgment about how authority should be exercised here.
I find it really interesting. I was just having this discussion with my husband the other day, who's English, and I was telling him I suddenly realized that I have no idea what my rights are here, and I know that in the United States, if a cop stops me, he has no right to search me. He has no right to. I don't have to answer any questions, things like that. And my husband was pretty much at a loss to tell me, what I could do. Well, maybe you can do that, but it would probably end badly.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
How have you? Do you feel that you're properly educated in your rights here? And do you feel comfortable as a citizen walking around the streets here in that regard?
I find that I have the same conundrum as you. As a Canadian, I had the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to make reference to. In the U.S., obviously, you have the Bill of Rights. Here, I've just done the permanent residency test, and there's I don't know, have you done it?
Not yet.
So there's a question, what sort of constitution does Britain have? And the correct answer is an unwritten one. And I don't know what kind of constitution is an unwritten constitution. And in the book, there's some material about how an unwritten constitution is spread out across a number of documents, starting with a Magna Carta, and it's just it's like a body of precedent and law and principle, none of which you can put your finger on. Like habeas corpus is in the Magna Carta, but it's suspended under the Terrorism Act. So it's not a constitution in the sense of a set of absolute principles that can never be overridden by government. It's a constitution in the Johnny Depp sense of more what you call guidelines.
Yeah, it's sort of contingent on the situation at the time. It's sort of a slightly posher way of making it up as you go along. Basically.
Yeah, and I think zero tolerance sometimes leads to some pretty bad outcomes. So I'm all for letting smart people exercise judgment when it's the right time to do it, but you need some kind of coherent picture of how you're going to stop bad things from happening as a result of the overexercise of this stuff. I guess so in Canada we have an official policy as regards to language. We are a bilingual nation. We are French and English, and there's never any question well, there's in fact lots of questions, but there's always an answer to the question, why is this also in French?